All right, track wrestling here. I'm with Coach Clayton. It's been a long week, Coach. Been doing a hell of a job getting everything going on. I asked you before this what your title is, and it's so long I don't want to screw it up. So why don't you get it right for me?
Manager of the National Coaches Education Program, or NCEP.
Okay, and that job is really, I've seen you wear a lot of hats this week. So for those people that haven't been as blessed as I to get to be around you and all these great coaches, kind of give people maybe the 60,000 foot view on what your job is.
You bet. My main job is to deal with coaches' education. That's anything from copper, bronze, silver, and gold level certifications for our coaches. Part of my job is to run the Olympic developmental camps. We run those every July, the week of July 4th, and we get about 100 kids and about 20 commuters, 10 coaches usually come in, so we got a big group, 8 mats at the Olympic Training Center. We've done strength training sessions, work with nutrition and rules video, and trying to green frame to try to get kids to take stressors, frame them in a different way that they can change stress into something that's more positive and that we can affect better. So we're trying to just really give kids a whole kind of person approach to make sure that we're developing them the right way, so that it's not just about winning medals, but it's about the process to get them there. So we do that camp every year in July, on the July 4th week, and we also do it the week after NCAA Division I's in March. It's about half the size, but we do those here at the Olympic Training Center, and just great opportunities for kids to come in, train usually with our national team staff or select staff like you coming in, and just really gives kids an opportunity to come in, train in this cool environment, learn a lot of things that they may not learn at a traditional camp, and hopefully they can take that home and share it with their communities.
Yeah, and for people that don't know, as one of the coaching staff, I want to explain to people that we are assigned a number of kids, usually 10 to 12, and what's interesting is you get to know those 10 to 12 kids really well. It's almost like summer camp where, they're responsible to you and vice versa. One of the cool things for me has been talking to these guys and just them being on, I guess what I call this, the campus. That they get to walk into the room, and for people that haven't been in this room, when you walk in, the very first thing on the left is a picture of every world or Olympic champion. And then, like you said, a room that's 8 mats, and then we got to see the weight room, and you get to see all these other facilities if you ask nicely enough. So how much of that, just being in an environment of highest level success, how much do you think that impacts these kids?
I think it's great. It's just like a lot of coaches want to take their kids to higher level tournaments.
Right.
So that, if I'm training at the Beast of the East or something like that, well, we wrestle our normal conference tournament. We've been in a bigger facility. We've been in a bigger gym. And so it's always nice to train up a little bit from where you're at. Gable used to always have the Olympic rings in the Iowa room because he said if our focus is Olympics, we're going to win a lot more at the college level. And if you're a high school room and you've got a lot of kids focused on college, you're going to win a lot more at the high school level. So it's always just trying to train a little bit one up. So to have the kids and these coaches on the Olympic Training Center, they're wrestling right next to Jaden Cox.
Yeah.
A lot of our women national staff. It's just such a neat environment to be around so many of our sports elite. I think it really helps the kids start to feel a little bit more comfortable in that environment, and still kind of keep the wow factor.
No, it was cool. I had 2 of my campers. They were working on this quad pod breakdown, and they said, "Coach, what do you think?" And I kind of tried to, troubleshoot it. I didn't see a problem with it, but it was so cool that 2 13-year-olds showed me. I'm like, maybe I'm missing something. So I was lucky enough to ask Terry Steiner to come over and look at it, and I kind of just introduced the situation, got out of the way, and he went through it with them just like they were, guys on his team, and they got to take a picture afterwards.
It's our national team staff's the best. Whether it's our women's freestyle team or men's freestyle team or men's Greco, they all want to come in and give their time to these athletes because they know how important this developmental opportunity is. And again, it's not just about these kids learning, but it's about them taking what they've learned back to their communities from all around the country and really helping to just bring wrestling up as a whole. And that's what we want here. We want wrestling for everybody to go up, and not just a select few. And I like what you said. We're trying to get, kids from lower income areas, from higher. We want everybody to get the opportunity to come here, and we try to write grants to get additional funding so that we can make these opportunities more affordable for our kids. So it's pretty neat.
Well, I think a cool part of that too is, if I'm a lower income kid and I get a grant or financial aid, or just, I go sell newspapers. I know it's not the case, but something like that.
Sure.
Excuse me, I fundraise. I get to train next to, there's guys here that won Fargo, there's guys here that are world team members, Ramos won the world championship yesterday, I think. in the cadets, and the guy that won his bracket at state is here.
Oh wow.
Noah Certain. So, I mean, it's just crazy the level of excellence. And I've noticed none of these kids really seem to be trying to big time each other, that it's a real spirit of cooperation.
I think you're 100% right. We try to set a tone too when the kids come in. Hey, we've got a great staff. You're in a great facility. You got to respect it. More than anything, we report to our boss, which is the U.S. Olympic Committee.
Right.
So it's important that we respect the facilities they help us to build. We pay for a little bit, they pay for a little bit, but they're here to support us and the dreams of our athletes and our coaches. And again, that's what I do in coach education. I get to work with all of our national team staff, work with coaches from around the world, work with our grassroots coaches, learn everything I can so that I can just put that back out to coaches at all levels as well. So I feel like I'm an intermediary, right? I'm no expert, but I get to learn it, I get to share it, and to me that's just a cool spot to be.
Right. Well, some of the things I'm doing with track and then in some of the charity things, it's networking. And I think what you are is a master networker. I mean, you obviously have your own set of skills, but, it's like me being able to pick Terry Steiner's brain, right? And you've created that environment where I don't have to say to these guys, yeah, it's good. I'm like, let's make sure it's great. And let's get a guy that's coached in the Olympic finals and done these kind of things. And
it's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's just their ability to say, hey, we're here for these kids. If they have a question, we're going to spend time for them. I mean, I don't think once this week did you ever see kids at 5 o'clock after a practice just take off and the room was empty. The kids were here.
It was the opposite. You got to chase them out of the room. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we had Jaden Cox wrestling around with his cousin today, and I put that video up. That's my most popular video right now. Nothing to do with me, but it's going well.
That's awesome.
So I think one of the things you talked, I don't want to go through all the subjects of what you covered,
Sure.
But one of the things you talked about was green framing. That's not a term I'm real familiar with, but my mom's a communications teacher, and she talks about putting things in language that are bite-sized and solvable. And I feel like that's kind of what green framing is. And I thought it was a cool exercise. You brought a couple kids up in front of the room, and one of them is a St. Louis kid. I'm not going to name him. He's a shy, quiet kid. And you guys talked about, for example, weight cutting and what part he can own, what part he can do better, how to look at, hey, I'm overweight, but I'm overweight in my weight class, but how to turn that into a positive, those kind of things. How much of that mentality do you feel like is ultimately helpful in these kids achieving success? And how often, because you get to see the best of the best, how often are you allowed to just sort of steal from these guys, the Snyders and the Burrows and those kind of guys, and be able to pass it along to these young bucks?
All right, so I've had a coach this week, and he said the best coaches steal.
We all steal, right?
Stealing, right? And
yeah.
So it's important to, and it's not, because we're all trying to share information. And even in 2015, United World Wrestling had the advanced coaches clinic. It's like the top clinic they do. We had coaches, 38 coaches from maybe 16, 18 different countries. And the first day they were like, we want everybody to share. And the Russians were like,
no.
I don't talk to Americans. And then the second day they were like, well, I'll show you a little bit, but I'm not going to show you all of it. By the third day, we're hugging each other and we're like showing each other stuff.
Yeah.
It takes setting up the environment where you want to share information. And we say, if your program's good, why don't you help the program across town? Because a rivalry across town will fill both gyms, and it's going to make your community better. So we want everybody in wrestling to raise up. So we tell coaches, share your information with other people. Like, be a community of wrestling. We're not big enough to isolate ourselves and compete against each other within these little internal cells. We've all got to work together because we're a small sport. A lot of people don't understand us, and if we can all work together, we're going to be able to reach out to people more and accentuate the positives of what we do. We had Aiden Valdez here. He lost his hand and he lost an eye last year at 4th of July. Local TV show came in and they said, hey, we want to interview you to make sure other kids learn from your experiences. And, it was a year ago. It's almost to the day. Yeah. And he's here at camp.
I saw him, yeah.
And he's got his
basically a mitt on. Yeah,
he's got his mitt on. He's like, I'm thinking about taking my eye out and rolling it across the mat when I go up against opponents to freak him out. What a positive attitude. He can say, I lost my eye, I lost my hand, and I'm done, and I hate this sport, I hate this life. I think he could really kind of check out and go a different direction. He's done the exact opposite. He's always been such an amazing young man. He wants to come back. He wants to go to the Olympics. He wants to go to the higher level. And whatever he's got to do, he's willing to do it. And he does it with such a positive attitude and such a love for the sport and the people that help him. those are the kind of young people that we want here, and those 99% of the time, those are the kind of people we get, and it's really humbling. It's a lot of work to get these camps and get things set up. This is when the rubber meets the road, is when these kids are in the room and they're rolling around with Jaden Cox, and
for sure
they're seeing Terry Steiner, some of their stuff.
Yeah, you get to pick those guys' brains. Yeah,
that's cool, right? And to see these kids have that connection, this is an opportunity. What wrestling's done for me is given me the opportunity to meet the woman that I'm going to marry someday, and which is really soon. But don't tell my parents yet. This isn't going to.
No, nobody watches Track.
Okay,
we're good.
okay.
Yeah, we're not the #1 website in the world in wrestling. It's fine.
Yeah, but it's my family, the place that I live, what I do, the activities I do. It's all because of wrestling. Where I'm at in my life is because of wrestling. If I can take my ego out and just say, now it's my time to give back. Let's give back to these kids. Let's give them the opportunities to get here, train, learn, and maybe have a little bit better opportunities to get some wins when they're out there. But if not, they know the process to get better, to become their best. And if we can grade ourselves against our own selves, you might be a lot better wrestler than me, but if I can get better and better and better, that should be my goal, right? Someday I'm going to try to beat you, and someday I will, I hope. But in the process,
you're running the race versus yourself most of the time, really. These other guys are just measuring sticks, right? You're judging your own progress.
It's good tests, right? We need competition to test. Right now, coaches love competition, right? We want our kids to have 350 matches in a year, and that's way too much, right?
Sure.
Competition is only great if your kids already have basic skills, so that they can refine and cement those skills through competition. But you put a kid out on the mat and you give him 20 matches, and his skills aren't where they need to be. Instead, what's happened is his negative skills, or the areas he's not as good in, those are becoming cemented. They're becoming habits. So you put a kid on the mat that doesn't have good habits, he's going to cement the bad ones. You put a kid on the mat who has good habits, they're going to cement the good ones. Training happens in the practice room. So test yourself in competition, but it doesn't have to be about hundreds of matches a year. That's too much for the body. Bill Zadig will tell you, most athletes have a 10-year competitive window. Do you want your kid to be the best 6 to 16-year-old? Do you want to be the best 16 to 26-year-old? Pick that 10-year window and really just let the kids have fun outside of that window, so that by the time they get to the point where it's really time to train, and that's usually around high school age, by the time they're really getting into training, now we can start to push them a little bit. Now they can manage their nutrition so weight works. And then all of a sudden some college opportunities might come, and we can keep them in that sport longer, and then eventually hopefully keep them in the international level as well. So it's not about just getting a million matches in. It's about getting great quality practice, knowing what you need to do, and then improving on it so you can test it here and there into some competition, in my mind.
No, and it's a perfect segue, and I appreciate you helping me do this interview. Because you talked to me as one of the coaches here about that you guys are implementing a new system to replace the seven effective habits of wrestling.
Sure.
Yeah, the skill sets. And I always compare those like to the 7 Habits of Effective People, that book. But you guys are replacing that with a new system. Take a few minutes and because I want to hear about that and then how that ties to your coaching development.
You bet. What's great about this job is I get to focus on wrestling and how we impact our kids. When I got hired, Les Gutch just said recruitment and retention. You've got to be able to recruit kids, get them in here, and we've got to be able to keep them in our sport. So if a coach is trying to run kids out, that's not really helping our sport grow. It's not helping the kids grow, and it's not giving them opportunities to learn the values that we all hold dear that we learned from wrestling. So we're not replacing 7 basic skills, but what we're going to do is we're going to refine them, and we're going to expand. Because the 7 basic skills, and a lot of people can still recite every back step, back arch. Once you get to the point where you know the 7 basic skills, that's great, but there are other things that we need to focus on in our sport. We need to focus on physical literacy. You teach a kid a high crotch, if he doesn't know how to thrust his hip forward, the high crotch isn't going to work. And so maybe we're yelling at a young person because they can't get a technique down, but we think they're not paying attention to the technical side or drilling the technical side, when in essence they just don't have the physical skills to be able to do some of the things we ask them to do. So there's going to be a piece for physical literacy. There's going to be a piece for health and nutrition. There's going to be a piece for life skills where we give them positive mental affirmations, positive self-talk. We're going to make sure that if you walk into a mom and dad's house and that mom says, "Why do you want my athlete to wrestle for you?" You can say, because when they leave, not only are they going to have position and motion skills like the 7 basic skills and a few others, they're also going to have physical literacy so that they have health for life, health skills so they can change their habits at any time and they know the right way to be healthier. And they've got these life skills so they can cope with the stresses of life a little better. And that's what wrestling teaches us all, but I don't think we've ever really had a one set curriculum that puts it out there, gives coaches the tools to learn how to teach it the right way to their kids. And we're not saying we know everything. There's so many coaches out there who are great at what they do. But if we can give this resource, and hopefully it'll come out as an app and something that's very technologically advanced, so you can say, I've got my kids in the room today, are they all level 1 at each skill? And when they are, then we can start to move those athletes forward.
Or if you have multiple coaches, you can have one coach working with them on level 1.
Absolutely.
And then the higher level guys aren't being held back. And you're able to group those guys together by skill set and not just by size, right?
100%. Yep. Maybe you have a starter practice for the first hour. Those kids can get out, because maybe an hour for first-year kids in high school, maybe that's enough.
Right.
Get them in for an hour, get them out, and they still stay involved in the sport, and that gives them a chance to.
You don't burn them out. They love it. Yeah, they stay involved.
If kids don't love the sport by the time it's time to train, they're maybe through high school, because mom and dad can kind of push on them or threaten them or do whatever they need to do, right? And I get it. Like, you've invested a lot in your kids' training and taken a lot of vacation for that sport. And to think your kid's going to hang it up, you might want to push them a little further. But if they don't have the internal love, and Doc Bennett, we get the opportunity to have Doc Bennett come into the office, and when he does, it's
Doc's the man.
You're right. I shut the phone off and I shut the door and I just poured him. And he said, my oldest son loved wrestling, wanted to wrestle, did all this stuff, and so we let him at a young age. And he said by the time he got to college, he was burnt out.
Yeah.
So he went to Oklahoma State and decided he wanted to rodeo. And so he didn't really wrestle after that. He said his youngest son never wanted anything to do with it, but he had to tag along because that's what the family was doing. So he'd play with games and toy cars and stuff, and he never really wrestled. But by the time he was about to high school, he's like, hey, Dad, do you think, all my friends are wrestling. Do you think now I could join? And he's like, well, I'm the high school coach. I'm sure the junior high coach is going to let you wrestle.
Sure.
So we got him in junior high, and that was really the first wrestling experience his younger son had. And he was, on number 2 on the ladder behind Tim Vanny for 6-8 years.
Right.
He had the opportunity to wrestle that international level because he really started to compete around 8th grade. That was really when wrestling started for him. So, if you're about 14 years old there, 14 to 24, that 10-year window, that gets you a couple years past college. That 10-year window is a pretty solid thing. We're hoping that a Kyle Snyder has a 30-year window, right?
Of course,
Jordan
sure.
Burroughs has a 30. We want that.
Helen Maroulis, all these.
Helen Maroulis, Adeline Gray. We want those longer windows so that we can watch our top athletes have that success. But things come up. Family, commitments, job, finances. There's a lot of things that come up in life that take us away from our focus. But if we can get this 5x5 matrix into the hands of our coaches, our athletes and our parents, we've got a long-term athlete development plan, so you could see by a year, if my kid's 12 and under, what should we be focused on? How long should a practice be? How many matches should they get in? Once they get into the high school, 13 to 18, what are we looking at for training? So we're trying to provide resources, and if you go to themat.com, click on coaches and educational resources, tons of free information.
It's awesome.
Great stuff, and check out a long-term athlete development poster and see where you're at. If our 4-year-old is training more than 4 hours a week, we don't recommend that. It's about 1 hour for every year you are until you get to about 9, right? So if I'm a 9-year-old, I can train 9 hours a week, and that's practice, competition, other sports. So we've got to be real mindful of how much we're putting our kids into those situations, and we just want to provide some information to share with our coaches that we learned from long-term athlete development and the U.S. athlete development model. So great partners with USOC, their coach education folks really go to bat to set us up for success. Chris Snyder is the head guy there, is former wrestler, former lacrosse player. So we've got a lot of folks in that pipeline on the Olympic level that just do so much to support us. So we're lucky to have that, and if we can share that with our coaches and they're open-minded enough to take a look at it and just consider some options on how they don't have to change their styles, but just maybe some tweaks here and there. See if we can recruit more kids into the sport and keep them longer. It's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that I think that grid, that 5x5 grid, it sort of dovetails nicely into what you've done here this week. You have coaches here of a lot of different levels. You got Mike Haggerty. He's a Missouri guy. So he's
Gold certified coach.
Yeah, I'm going to be 48 this month, and he coached me when in the high school nationals. Him and my dad. So they both drink from the fountain of youth. And and you got some guys that are a little bit younger, like myself, and you got some young guys, and you got some guys that are maybe older, but they're young in the sport.
Sure.
And so, one of the guys here actually wrestled for me in college. So it's kind of crazy. It's like Lacuna Matata here right now. But one of the cool things I think is I'm watching the coaches, and I've tried to do this here this week as well. The coaches helping the other coaches. Like you had 3 guys here do their presentations this week for certification, and all 3 of them all talk to us, and they're like, hey, if you see anything we can do better, And we all went to them, like each of us, and like, my roommate and I have a third roommate who presented, but we went to all the guys like, hey, if there's anything you need for us to do. One guy just took pictures for him, so he could help publicize it. And I thought the camaraderie of that, and I think this 5x5 grid is going to help a coach who maybe is relatively new to the sport or just relatively new to coaching. I've always thought the dichotomy is interesting, that as an athlete, the most successful athletes, it's hard to say out loud, but are selfish, and the best coaches teach guys how to be unselfish.
100%.
So I think you're teaching these guys how to take a bunch of alpha males and find a way for them to care about each other. I think that's pretty cool.
Because once you get that bond, we all want to bond. There's a research study where they gave rats a chance to drink water and heroin, and they were in a cage. And if the water was consumed, some of the rats liked it, but there was no other bond for those rats. So they would go to the heroin water until they overdosed and killed themselves, because they just wanted some kind of a stimulation, some kind of a connection. And then when they did the search, they realized, well, what if we give the rats a chance to go down this tube and their buddies are hanging out and they can play with them? And what if we give another tube down here and there's all the food they can eat, so it's all their favorite foods? And what they realized is when these rats had the ability to hang out with their friends and eat the food they wanted to eat, they would go to the water because they didn't need the stimulus of the heroin water, right? And we're not that much different. If we have a good bond, a good healthy relationship, and all of our needs are met, then we're going to pick good options, right? And so as coaches, if we can bond our kids to good things, they're not going to bond to the bad things. And that's our job, is to make sure we're pulling these kids out of bad situations, replace the bad situation with positive. At the end of the day, that's it. If you say the best thing that ever happened to my kid was he won state in high school, and then he has a really crappy life, we didn't do our job.
Somebody screwed up, right? So I have to tell you this, Coach. I think you're about the 80th long interview I've done for Track Wrestling. And a lot of people I've talked to, I told them I was coming up here, told them I was going to be working for you this week. And a lot of people think very highly of you, and they talk about how you're a deep thinker and sort of, maybe a little bit outside the box thinker. I've had 80 interviews. No one's ever been able to tie lab rats to growing wrestling. And I think that's pretty awesome. I gotta give you credit for that, because as you were telling me, I'm starting like that makes total sense. Like, all people want connection, right? And wrestling is this connecting thing. I was at a seminar, got to take my dad, who just turned 75. We did a seminar together for one of our ex-wrestlers at a jiu-jitsu school, and we're all sitting around afterwards, and I'm like, without these sports, none of us would probably, me and my dad would be the only guys that would know each other. He stuck with me, but the rest of these people, like, we're all important in each other's lives because of sport. And the lessons, we trained with these guys and bled with them and sweat with them and cried with them and triumphed with them. And I think you're doing an unbelievable service for these kids. There's kids here who, if they had memory on their phones, it would be gone after all the photos and everything they took and videos this week. And I think it's awesome, this environment. So for the people that, I know you're not going to do another one until March, and then the bigger one will be next July. And, if they want to get involved in this, how do they apply? How do they find out the parameters, the finances? How does that happen?
You bet. Most of our camps are cadet and junior age groups.
Okay.
If we're having trouble filling those spots, we can always go down to schoolboys. So we do have schoolboys that we allow to apply for the camp. But if you go to the mat.com, click on memberships, and then if you click on athletes, and then click developmental camps, we'll have links so that you can click on that link, apply to the camp. There's a lot that goes into how we set up the camp, because a Fargo national champ might pay $250, but a kid that didn't even go to Fargo might pay $650. So our elite athletes are paying a little less because we know they're always out there going to tournaments, going overseas, doing stuff.
And they make the room better.
And they make the room better. So they bring a lot of value.
Yeah.
So if you're paying a little bit more, maybe your skills aren't as good, but now you get to wrestle up a little bit. So you're going to come out with a lot more of the value for the money that you had, where these guys are kind of helping you donate that. So there's different pay levels. Again, we do accept.
If they can apply and kind of figure out where they fall based on basically their resume.
You bet. And not even so much the resume. The resume certainly helps, and I'll see the price codes. We do a break-even camp. We don't make money on these.
Yeah,
I don't get paid on this. Our coaching staff, you guys don't get paid. You all volunteer.
Just free ice cream. That's all we get.
There you go. Free ice milk. I think. But that's not my category. But it is. It's an opportunity for us to say, hey, we're not in it for money. We're not in it for anything other than to help these kids have a great experience and just keep pushing that ball forward for our sport. And it's really neat for me. Like, this is my 8th camp in 4 years of this style. And you start to see some of these kids that have come through, and all of a sudden a kid goes to Cornell and wins a national title. A kid goes to Iowa and wins a national title. You start to think to yourself, like, man, I remember when those kids were, freshmen, sophomores, juniors in high school, and now to see them at the elite levels, it's just so cool to know that at some point you had connection with them. No credit to me or to anything specific. There's so many people that make our stars great, but it's just so neat to see that a lot of them have come through this developmental process, and now they get on a cadet junior world team, and then they get picked up and they start going off on that next level. So if you've got great kids and they're really looking for that next level, if we can get them into camp, maybe that helps get them recognized. If you take them to the big USA Wrestling events, it's going to help them get a little bit more recognized. As long as you're balancing the competition with training, I think there's some really good opportunities that USA Wrestling can provide our kids.
For sure. And I mean, I know you know this, I run a charity wrestling event, and, I have nothing to do with how good these kids are, but, I'm proud of what those alumni, what those guys have done. We've got All-Americans, junior world champion, a bunch of guys that have placed, and, a couple guys on the ladder. I think if you guys had almost a running tally of your alumni, I think from a marketing point of view, it would be amazing just to see all those guys, because you see the guys that went to Super 32s or NHSCAs or obviously Fargo, but I think this is a different kind of thing, and I'm sure most of those guys would be glad to give you recommendations of what this experience was like, and not all of them came here as hammers. Like some of them probably came here on that 650 number, and that's part of their development and becoming a hammer.
Absolutely. And it's so tough because you try to say, well, if my kid's 6 and 7 and he's winning everything, he's going to be the next Olympic gold medalist. There's zero correlation between success at an early age, success at a later age. A lot of these guys,
it's almost the opposite, right?
Almost. They did an interview. I wasn't at this year's NCAAs, but the year before. And they were asking all the finalists, like, how did it start off for you when you were wrestling? I remember, like, a Zane Rutherford. He's like, I got the crap kicked out of me.
They all got killed.
Yeah, they all got beat up, and a lot of them were like, I came off the mat crying, and my dad was like giving me a hug. My mom was like, you don't have to do this if you want. I'm like, no, I want to do it. I remember my first finals. My mom had to lie about my age. I had to be 6. And I was 5, and my mom's not a liar. So they were like, is he 6? And she's like, his birthday's today. And it was my 5th birthday. So she didn't really lie about it. But I remember wrestling Hildegard from Iowa, who ended up wrestling Oklahoma. And he ended up being a 3-time Iowa State champ. But I'm wrestling him in the finals. He's a couple years older than me. And he just kicking the crap out of me. And this was before a tech fall. And he kind of looks up at me. And the ref kind of looks at me. And I'm like getting just crushed. And the ref goes, do you want to keep going? And I knew if I said anything, I'd start bawling. And I just looked at him and I just nodded. I was like, I'm getting crushed. But for some reason, I love the sport enough that even getting crushed, being on the mat was better than being off the mat. And so I don't know how we necessarily, there's no magic to getting kids to love this sport. But, the more they're around things that they enjoy. For me, my brother would, in his high school team, they'd run out onto the mat under the lights in robes and tights, back in the day.
Yeah,
and I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And, the neighbor daughter, like we'd sit like backwards in the bleachers. And we'd pretend like we were reporters for the match. And we'd call the commentary.
That's awesome.
While the head table. I was like, I learned a love for the sport growing into it with family and friends. And so whatever we can do to make the sport fun and it doesn't have to be about winning all the time. Winning will take care of itself if we're preparing right and developing that love.
What's interesting is, a couple of things. Like I remember I wrestled one tournament in the 4th grade, got the crap kicked out of me. Only neither one of my parents were like, that my dad said you should have trained harder, and my mother said you're right. And I said I don't want to do it. And my dad said, okay, it's better than not, doing it halfway. And then I got to be in 7th grade and, kind of followed the path you're talking about. But what's interesting is the path of guys like yourself, myself, we're not world champions, but we love the sport. And, you're here on a break-even basis. I'm here on a break-even basis. And, all these other guys are to just give back and, to help kids that you're not going to get credit for, I'm not going to get credit for, because we love the sport and because the sport made us the men we are. And, usually these, hopefully it's people of integrity, it's people of honesty, people you and I were talking about the other day about people that keep their word, that they're reliable. And I think wrestling builds all those things, builds accountability. And I know from doing fundraising, from being in an organization that's supported by fundraising, most of the biggest dollars are not donated by the most successful athletes. They're the people that love the sport. They just love the grind. They love being on the bus and, being teammates with guys. So I think it's just a cool aspect of the sport. And, I'm up here for a week and I'm explaining to people that know nothing about wrestling. They're like, you're away from your job for a week and they're not paying you? I'm like, I get to stay in a dorm room.
Food and bed, right? What else can you want?
Yeah, it's amazing what you guys are doing up here. It's super cool.
It's a lot of fun. And now with our early accelerator program, we're bringing in some high school age kids that are at a pretty elite level, and they get to live here and train here, go to school here, travel internationally. Joe Russell's training them while Kevin Jackson's over in Croatia with the team.
Yeah.
It's so neat to see the different opportunities that are coming up, and it really is. I really enjoy working for USA Wrestling. I'm proud of our organization and what we're trying to do. We're not perfect either, right? Nobody's out there perfect, so we can't put that pressure on our kids and our coaches that everything's perfect. But if we're always moving that ball forward, we can really do something that helps us, like I said, bring people into the sport and keep them here longer. And that's boys, that's girls, that's kids of high income, low income. There are no barriers, right?
Yeah.
We don't have a Paralympic wrestling. We have wrestling. Everybody is welcome in our sport. And United World Wrestling had a campaign where they called it "Everyone Bring One," and it means that every kid in your practice, once a month, bring a friend to sit and watch. Maybe they like it, maybe they don't. But if you got 30 kids on your team and everybody brings a kid to watch, maybe tomorrow you got 35 kids on your team.
That's right.
There's ways to grow the sport and get your numbers up. I grew up in Iowa, and my small town in Iowa has never really filled a full team. And you start to see that more and more where we don't have those numbers. Step one, fill your team. Take the forfeits that the other team's leaving there. Don't run your kids off. Just put a kid in a singlet and get a hand raised. They're going to help contribute to your team's success. Start by getting the basics covered, and then you can start to build the program and the success as it goes. It's a struggle. We had a coach out at Silver College, and so once you do your copper, which is our 12 and under certification, bronze is 13 and up, there's optional certifications at silver and gold. One of the coolest things I do is a 3-day silver coaches college here at the training center or at the World or the Olympic trials every summer. And one of the coaches came out and after the silver college, he said, I'm going to go back home with a different mindset, because we've always thought, the cream's going to rise to the top, so let's push them all at this level, and the weak will fall off, and the cream rises to the top. And what he said, he's like, we're just going to go back and have fun and try to keep all the kids. And he said, now coaching is more fun for me. Coaching and the practices are more fun for the kids. We don't need to run kids out of this sport. This sport will take care of that on its own. Try to create an environment where kids want to come in every day.
He green framed it.
There you go. Right?
Yeah.
We've got to take whatever stresses us and change it to a way that we can be, more supportive. I had a coach in St. Louis that runs a club, and he said, I go into practice and I tell the kids if I've had a bad day. I had a bad day today, and I didn't want to come to practice, but I have a commitment to you guys.
Yeah.
So when you guys have a bad day, understand we all have bad days. We all honor our commitments. We all meet here. This is our bond.